Back in 1992, Sonic the Hedgehog 2 introduced a 7th Chaos Emerald and in turn allowed Sonic to turn to Super Sonic. Initially, this was just a nice reward for putting yourself through those ridiculous special stages. In later years, however, Sonic Team decided to start putting exclusive bosses for Super Sonic for some sort of climactic finale. Let's go through the years to see how the boss fights and the means to access them have changed. Sonic & Knuckles may have only been meant to be half of a game, but it was the first to introduce an exclusive Super Sonic boss fight. Just like Sonic 2, the Chaos Emeralds are collected via special stages, and honestly, the way they're handled in this game is probably the best it's ever been done. A special stage can be entered by finding one of these giant rings. There are multiple across each level, and each one can be used to gain a Chaos Emerald. The stages themselves consist of grabbing these blue balls, spheres. Yeah, it's probably good that they changed that. This is probably just because I've been playing this game since I was a kid, but these stages aren't too difficult. Even then, there are so many giant rings across the levels that you get more than enough attempts to collect the emeralds across a playthrough. Once you've grabbed the emeralds, you can turn into Super Sonic, or in Sonic 3 and Knuckles, you can grab the Super Emeralds as well and turn into Hyper Sonic. After bonking Eggman's big nose and fat fingers, Sonic turns either Super or Hyper to chase down the boss, which apparently is called the Final Weapon. Maybe all the budget went to the design and not the name. To start off, we just move forward avoiding asteroids and missiles. Nothing can hurt you, but they do slow you down considerably. Once Sonic makes it to the boss, the first phase consists of guiding missiles that Eggman fires so that they hit the boss's face. Sonic can't directly hurt the boss. He needs the missiles to win this fight, so why does Eggman bother firing them? If he didn't fire them, Sonic would run out of rings and he'd just win. After 8 hits, the second phase starts, which is simply holding right to win. Okay, it's not that simple. You do need to avoid asteroids and attacks from the boss, but even then it's not too difficult. So long as you keep your ring count up, you have more than enough time to catch up to Eggman 8 times to beat the boss and regain the Master Emerald. Pretty simple, but that's to be expected from the first Super Sonic boss. The next time we see Super Sonic is in 1998's Sonic Adventure. If you've watched my previous videos, you know I'm well acquainted with this game. Too well acquainted in some cases. To my knowledge, this is the first game where the Chaos Emeralds are collected as you play the main story. Instead of playing special stages to get them, you find these incredibly powerful gems just lying around on the ground of the forest, inside frogs, and in the ownership of a fat cat. Playing through each of the stories unlocks the final boss, which is Hold Forward to win. Perfect Chaos does have attacks, but they're very easy to avoid, and so long as you have enough speed, all it takes is to go headfirst into Chaos. Technically, this is 2 phases, but you play them exactly the same way. Honestly, the most annoying part about this boss is that they play Open Your Heart, the main theme of the game, in the first phase instead of the second. 6 hits is all it takes to take out Perfect Chaos. Tails, say the line.
All's well that ends well, right?
Thanks. Okay, now let's move on to another adventure game. One that garnered great reviews at release and is looked at fondly. I am, of course, talking about Sonic Pocket Adventure. Yeah, I'm going through the series chronologically, and this was the next game after Adventure 1. Have you guys played Sonic 2? Well, you've played Sonic Pocket Adventure. This game is just Sonic 2 level design with Sonic 3 music, and honestly, it's genuinely a good game. Unfortunately, since this game is based off Sonic 2, so are the special stages, and these are quite annoying. You just don't have enough time to react to avoid bombs and such. Also, despite being based off Sonic 2, entering special stages is done just like Sonic 1, where you need to collect 50 rings and enter the giant ring at the end of the stage. The issue is that you can only do this on Act 1 of each zone. There are only 6 zones, so you get 1 attempt at each special stage in a single playthrough. This means it is pretty much required to revisit stages to get all the emeralds, because there is no way you're clearing these nightmares in 1 attempt. You might have noticed I said 6 zones earlier, and that's because you can only get 6 emeralds from special stages. Eggman has the 7th one, and you need to collect it during the last Utopia boss to unlock the true final boss. To do that, you need to land hits on the emerald itself. That's right, you don't just get the emerald for beating the boss normally, you have to physically hit the emerald. After 8 hits on the emerald, it's knocked loose and can be picked up. The boss can then be beaten normally to access a Super Sonic boss fight. Initially, this may seem like a retread of Doomsday Zone, and that's what I thought until I realised I had no idea how to damage the boss. Ramming into him does nothing, and I assumed that the missiles were a hazard just like Doomsday Zone, but no. It took me accidentally dashing into a missile to realise that you need to deflect the missiles into the boss. I don't know if I'm just bad, but doing this was quite finicky. The controls seemed quite sensitive, which led to me missing a lot. Also, why is Sky Sanctuary's music playing during this boss? It seems a bit unfitting. 8 hits later, Sonic blows Eggman up and the day is saved. Now it's time to move on to the game I alluded to earlier, Sonic Adventure 2. Beloved by many and quite possibly contains the most iconic final boss theme in Sonic history. Like Adventure 1, the only requirement to access the final boss is to complete both stories in this game. After 1 level and the Bio-Lizard boss fight, which I think is a much better boss fight than the final boss by the way, the Bio-Lizard decides to merge with the Eclipse Cannon and we decide to turn super to stop him. How did they get away with this? This isn't even subtle. The final boss is the final hazard, and let's be honest here, this fight isn't very good. It's finicky, and the hit detection on the weak points can be suspect at best. At least the song's good.
Can you feel life moving through your mind? Ooh, looks like it came back for more. Yeah!
We also get the first instance in the series where we play not only as Sonic but as another character. In this case, Shadow. There's no difference in how they play. They just allow you to regain some rings by swapping between the two. This boss fight also has a time limit of 5 minutes, and Sonic's friends will remind you of that throughout. The screen will also turn redder the longer the fight goes. As Rouge once said,
5 minutes should be plenty.
so that shouldn't be an issue. After enough hits, the final hazard dies and so does Shadow. Kind of. It's time to spend a bit of time on the Game Boy Advance and everyone's favourite Sonic developer, Dimps. Now guys, Dimps didn't have that reputation yet, although the level design of the last few stages of this game definitely reek of Dimps. However, Sonic Advance is a good game, and it's structured much like the classics, and that goes for collecting the Chaos Emeralds too. To enter these special stages, you need to find a special spring hidden in certain levels. They're not that hard to find, but it is annoying how there aren't multiple of them throughout levels. The special stages themselves are alright. I mean, the depth perception here takes a bit to get used to, but other than the last one, it shouldn't take too long to grab all the emeralds. However, grabbing all the emeralds isn't enough. You also have to complete the game with all 4 characters: Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, and Amy. Since a full playthrough of Advance takes just under an hour, this isn't awful, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a bit tired by the end of it. Doing this unlocks the Moon Zone and the Super Egg Robot boss fight. I'd love to give an in-depth analysis of this fight, but I honestly just kept jumping at the robot's head until it died. Things were just happening around me while I just brute forced it. This boss is over in less than a minute, so I'm not going to put any more effort into it than I need to. On to the next game. Sonic Advance 2. I really like this game. Probably my favourite of the Advance series, but oh my god, getting to the final boss in this game is like headbutting a wall. It doesn't accomplish much, it hurts your head, and everyone thinks you're weird for doing it. First off, the easy stuff. You have to beat the game with all the characters just like Advance 1. That's alright. Yet again, I like this game. What's not alright is how you get to the special stages in this game. This game emphasizes speed much more than Advance 1. So why did the developers decide that you need to collect 7 special rings across the level in one attempt to have a chance at the emerald? If you're gonna make it that much of a ball ache, can you just give me the emerald at the end of it? Why do you have to make me go through a special stage as well? But don't get me wrong, these stages are ridiculously easy. They're no problem at all, but just getting to them is painful. Oh, and unlike Advance 1, Chaos Emeralds aren't shared between characters, so you have to collect them all with Sonic, who's probably the hardest character to use to collect the special rings. Once you've checked off those ridiculous requirements, you unlock True Area 53 and need to beat the boss to save Cream's mother. We already saved her in the main game, but she got recaptured, so it's Super Sonic time. This boss is the Sonic Pocket Adventure final boss, but on steroids. You damage it in the exact same way by deflecting the missiles back at the boss. In all fairness, I actually think this boss is pretty good. Not too easy, it's not too short, and I like the music. There's not much more I can say about it, mostly because you're just doing the same thing for the whole fight, but I do think it's one of the better fights so far. Now, if you know your Sonic, you're probably expecting the next chronological game to be Heroes, and yes, we will be covering Heroes before Advance 3. However, there was a Sonic game released in between Advance 2 and Heroes, and you won't guess what it was released on. Yes, it's that. Do you not know what this is? Well, imagine a bad handheld console and a bad mobile phone. Put those two things together and you get the Nokia N-Gage. And yes, they decided to release a Sonic game for this thing. Sonic N. Let's check it out, I guess. I have a question. Have you ever wanted to play Sonic Advance the long way? Yeah, Sonic N is just Sonic Advance with a different aspect ratio that makes it much harder to see what's coming up. Oh, you can play with the original aspect ratio, but that makes it about as pixelated as those Japanese movies I see online. What more can I say? It's a direct port of Advance, but worse. And that goes for the final boss as well. I mean, listen to that clear theme. I don't know if it actually sounded like that on the phone itself, or if the emulator did that, but that is awful. What's funny is I actually think it's a pretty decent port, considering it's on a phone. It's probably a better port than Sonic Genesis, but that bar is so low, I'm pretty sure I'll trip over it when I get to hell. You might be thinking I wasted my time with this, but hey, it has a different name, so I wanted to check it out. Also, I couldn't find footage of the final boss of this game anywhere on YouTube, so I'm just going to assume I'm the only person insane enough to do this. It's time to talk about an actual game now, Sonic Heroes. The first 3D game to have special stages for the Chaos Emeralds. No, 3D Blast doesn't count. Getting to the special stages requires you to grab a key in Act 2 of each stage and not get hit until the end of the level. This isn't that difficult to do. The special stage itself is one of the most miserable things I've played in the Sonic game. All you have to do is collect orbs to fill a boost case to continue boosting until you grab the emerald. But this control is a crime against humanity. I get that the control is a bit slippery in normal play, but why is it so bad in the special stage? At no point do I feel in complete control in these things, and that is an issue when I have to avoid bombs to have a chance at grabbing the emerald. It honestly makes these comfortably the worst special stages in the series for me. These are frustrating and aren't really that rewarding when you beat them. You don't even get to turn super in regular levels, but I shouldn't be too surprised at that. They stopped doing that after the classics. It goes without saying that you also need to complete all 4 team stories alongside grabbing all 7 emeralds to unlock the final story. Playing the same 14 levels 4 times may sound tiring, and that's because it is. In my opinion anyway. The final story consists of a boss fight that is split into 2 stages. We're only interested in Metal Overlord, because that's the only part where you play as Super Sonic. Tails and Knuckles only get these bubble shields, however, because they're not the main character, even though both have been shown to have super forms before and since. Underwhelming shield aside, this fight is fine, I guess. There's not much to it, to be honest. Metal has 3 different attacks that can be countered by Sonic, Tails, or Knuckles. Sonic can use the Rocket Itzel and homing attack, Tails can use Rocket Shoot, and Knuckles can punch his way through his problems like he always does. Countering these attacks fills up the Team Blast meter, which is the only way to hurt Metal Overlord. After 5 Team Blasts, the fight is over. It's a pretty simple boss, really. Music's good though.
Trying to reach inside of me. Trying to get my ammunition. Let me show you just what I'm made of.
Back to the GBA and its Sonic Advance 3. If getting the Chaos Emeralds in Advance 2 was like headbutting a wall, getting them in Advance 3 was like headbutting a nuke. Now that I think about it, I actually think headbutting a nuke would be a better time, because at least it'd be over quicker. I'm not the biggest fan of Advance 3, and the method to getting the Chaos Emeralds is a major factor for that. So what do you have to do to enter a special stage in this game? Well, first, you need to find 10 Chao hidden throughout each zone. Each zone consists of 3 acts as well as a hub world. You would think that the Chao would be split up evenly between the acts, and they are at first, with 3 Chao in each act with 1 hidden in the hub world. Then, for no reason at all, they decide to change this with some acts having 4 Chao in them and 1 hub world not having a Chao in it at all. Now you'd think after finding all the Chao you would gain access to the special stage, but no. You then have to find a special key hidden in one of the acts which can either be in one of 2 spots. Then, you need to find a special spring hidden in the hub world. After all of this, you get 1 attempt at a special stage. If you mess up, you need to grab another special key to have another attempt. Thankfully, you don't need to grab all the Chao in 1 attempt like the special rings at Advance 2, but it's still annoying. It doesn't help that I'm not a massive fan of the level design in this game. Or should I say lack of level design in this game? Okay, this isn't a review of Advance 3, so what are the special stages like? They're alright. They suffer from the same depth perception issue from Advance 1, but the only one that gave me some trouble was the last one. The real pain came from just getting to them. Luckily, Advance 3 doesn't require you to play the game multiple times or anything to get to the final boss. You just need the Chaos Emeralds. The boss itself is Ultimate Gemerald? Gemerald? I don't know. Anyway, he steals the Chaos Emerald from Sonic to turn into this, and for some reason gives back the emeralds. Maybe he wanted a fair fight. You actually team up with Eggman in this fight, which is interesting. You have to use your tag action to open up the boss's weak point. You can then dash into it with Sonic to damage it. Other than that, all you need to do is avoid attacks and keep opening up the weak point to hit it. This was honestly a bit tedious for me, but maybe that's just because I wasn't playing very well. I did play the Advanced Trilogy one after another in the space of 3 days, so maybe I was a bit advanced out. After 12 hits, the boss is over, and so is Advance 3. The next game is Rush, and I'm sorry in advance for the presentation of the DS games because, thankfully, boss fights only use 1 screen. Now, this game is very good, but it was also made by Dimps, so you might be expecting some ludicrous way to get the Chaos Emeralds, but entering special stages in Rush is fairly simple. There are these special pulleys across each level. All you need to do is boost for long enough on one of them to enter the special stage. There are multiple pulleys across each level, so locating one isn't too hard. The only downside is that each special stage is tied to each of the 7 zones, which means you can't collect multiple emeralds in one zone. The special stages themselves are very easy. Yes, it's the half-pipe again, but the precision you can get with a DS stylus makes collecting rings very easy. The only problem is that I didn't play using a DS, I emulated it, and the control stick is nowhere near as precise as a stylus. They were still easy, but the last one was pretty much impossible without cheesing it by pausing. Along with collecting the Chaos Emeralds with Sonic, the Soul Emeralds need to be collected with Blaze. This only requires completing Blaze's story. After collecting all the emeralds, we get the chance to face the Egg Salamander. Sonic, Blaze, and the Eggmans aren't the only ones to show up to this fight, as Malcolm X, of all people, makes an appearance in the music.
It's just like when you got some coffee that's too black, which means it's too strong.
Too strong, too black, too strong.
It's a weird choice, but it sounds good. The fight itself starts exactly like Doomsday Zone, and yet again, Sonic needs to deflect attacks back at the boss to damage it. There's not much more to say about Sonic sections really. They've done this type of boss previously in Pocket Adventure and Advance 2. What sets this boss apart from the rest is that you also play as Blaze. After a few hits with Sonic, we change over to Blaze, who thankfully attacks in a different way. Blaze is able to charge up a fireball which can then be fired at the boss to damage it. This is way better than deflecting attacks as it feels much less random. There are 5 phases overall, with control alternating between Sonic and Blaze. Not much changes between the phases except the chase section from the first phase is omitted from later ones. Also, the last 2 phases speed up the music. Not much more to say, just keep deflecting attacks and firing fireballs until the boss ends. This finishes Rush, and Cream looks very sad about it. Sonic's loving it though. Since I'm doing this video in chronological order, you might think Shadow the Hedgehog is next, but I'm not doing that game for 2 reasons. 1, this video was about Super Sonic and Shadow is not Sonic, and B, I don't want to play Shadow the Hedgehog. I've never played it, and you can't make me play it. Yet. Whilst we're here, I'm also not covering Black Knight or Secret Rings, since both contain different forms of Sonic that aren't Super Sonic, so they don't qualify for this video. Also, I'm planning on doing a separate video about the storybook games, so I'll cover them then. With that bit of admin out the way, that leaves us, chronologically, in 2006. No prizes for guessing what game's next. I don't need to introduce the game, it speaks for itself. Thankfully, you don't need to actively collect Chaos Emeralds in this game. Much like the adventure games, you only need to complete each story to unlock the final one. This does mean you have to play as Silver, which may be more miserable than playing special stages, but I digress. I'm not going to talk through the story because it's awful, so we get the emeralds and the 3 hedgehogs turn super to stop the Crest of Hyrule. Solaris is split up into 2 phases. Phase 1 requires you to take out Solaris' armor first. Silver attacks by grabbing meteors and throwing them at Solaris using his Psychokinesis. Shadow uses his Chaos Spears, and Sonic just rams headfirst into him. What the game doesn't tell you is that only one of the hedgehogs can hurt Solaris at certain points. At the start of the fight, only Silver can damage the boss. After the first bit of armor is broken, only Shadow can hurt Solaris, and after another bit has been broken, only Sonic can be used. Once all the armor is gone, anyone can be used. None of this is difficult. I mean, using Silver can be a bit annoying since the meteors like to blow up for no reason, but still, phase 1 is no issue. After this comes a phase which, much like the rest of the game, has annoyingly good music. The only difference in this phase is that you can only damage Solaris when he himself is attacking. The good thing is that any of the hedgehogs can be used to inflict damage. However, good luck using Silver because there's no way those meteors are getting to Solaris without combusting. Also, Sonic's attacks sometimes just don't work, and I don't know why. Shadow is comfortably the easiest one to hit Solaris with. That's about it. The fight doesn't really change much except Solaris going crazy with the lasers near the end of the fight. I don't want to talk more about this game right now, so let's move on. Back to the Rush series with Rush Adventure, and oh boy is this an adventure. We're deep in the dark age of Sonic now, so games decide to add unrelated nonsense alongside the actual Sonic gameplay for seemingly no reason. In this game's case, we have these ocean segments between the levels. Individually, they're alright, but near the end of the game, I just want to get to the next stage already. These sections are actually the way to obtain the Chaos Emeralds in this game. You're able to choose the path you take on a map, and certain areas have a guy named Johnny who challenges you to a race. These essentially act as special stages for this game, as beating him grants you a Chaos Emerald. The first few are easy to clear, but later ones are pretty impossible without upgrading your vehicle. You need materials for that, and you can only get them from playing levels, which means you have to grind to get the required amount to upgrade your stuff. Once upgraded, getting the emeralds is no problem, but why do I have to grind in a Sonic game? The only grinding I should be doing is on rails. Just like Rush, however, we need to get the Soul Emeralds as well. These are obtained via missions given to you by this guy in the hub world. The missions themselves are easy, as they're either slightly more difficult boss fights or just playing through an already completed level without dying. With both sets of emeralds, we confront both Eggmans who legitimately only show up for the true final boss. Either way, the Eggmen are after this powerful scepter which happens to be underground. Sonic and the team chase them by burrowing underground with a new contraption which looks a bit suspect. Should I be censoring this? After a bit of plowing, we get to the scepter, but the Eggmen get there first, which sets up the boss fight. I can't be the only one who thinks this robot looks a bit like the Pokemon Palafin, right? Much like Rush, we take control of both Supersonic and Burning Blaze for this fight against the Egg Wizard. However, we are able to switch between the two whenever we want in this game. Also, while Sonic still deflects attacks, he doesn't do it by ramming headfirst into them anymore. Instead, he does this wax-on, wax-off maneuver, which, in my opinion, is much better. It's just so much more satisfying to bounce back attacks like this, and I don't really know why. Blaze still attacks in the same way and is also really useful. The goal is to basically deflect as many attacks back as possible with Sonic, and use Blaze to inflict damage using a fireballs whenever the boss isn't attacking. Honestly, this boss kind of rules. It's got 3 phases, with each phase adding more attacks whilst also increasing the speed of the fight overall. It's fast, it's frantic, and it's satisfying to deal damage. It's weird how a game that I'm pretty indifferent about probably has my favourite super fight so far. We also end it by piercing straight through the boss, which is a cool visual, and also a preview of some of the bosses to come. Now, it's such a shame that I have to follow that up with Sonic Chronicles. This game sucks. Sonic's first and so far only attempt at an RPG leaves a lot to be desired. I had never played the game before this video. I was very tempted to not play it at all and just lie my way through this section, but I persevered and played through the entire game to get the Supersonic fight. And I'm going to reiterate what I said earlier. This game sucks. Except character interactions. I think they're pretty good. The battle system is somehow both tiring and frustrating. Tiring due to the sheer number of battles you'll be dragged into, and frustrating due to some things just not working sometimes. Thankfully, the Chaos Emerald are collected automatically as you drag yourself through the game. And after dragging yourself through the game, you're met with the worst remix in the history of mankind in the final world. Just in case you're not aware, that was a remix of this. After all that nonsense, what kind of supersonic fight awaits us? 30 seconds. I am not exaggerating, I literally timed it. It's over in 1 move. I played through an entire RPG for a 30-second fight. What happens after that? Probably one of the worst endings I've ever seen in a video game. You learn that Eggman has conquered the world, you get shot down, and then the game just ends. Sonic Unleashed! This game has 2 different versions, but thankfully neither requires special stages to gather the Chaos Emeralds. The final boss for both versions is split up into 2 phases, however you don't play as Supersonic in the first one, so I'm ignoring it. Perfect Dark Gaia is the boss, and in the Wii/PS2 version, you have to build up your boost gauge and then charge at one of Dark Gaia's eyes. Well, you have to wait for an opening to boost into the eyes, but sometimes the prompt just doesn't appear. There's not much more to this fight. It's just the same thing repeated for 7 eyes whilst avoiding attacks that were copy and pasted from secret rings, so I'm gonna move on to the HD version, which starts off with a section that I can best describe as a 3D version of Doomsday Zone, which is pretty cool. Weirdly enough, Supersonic has a health bar in this game instead of using rings as a time limit like in every other outing. After the Doomsday segment, a shield needs to be taken out by damaging multiple tentacle things. Once this is done, I hope you like pressing buttons and watching things happen, because the rest of the fight is quick time events, including one where you have to 1 penetration later, and that's another boss dealt with. You know, these games go by much faster when I don't have to talk about collecting the emeralds. Next is Sonic Colors, and I know what you're thinking. Sonic Colors doesn't have a supersonic fight! You're right. Sonic Colors doesn't have one, but Sonic Colors does. Also, yes, there's a U in the word colours because I'm British. God save our gracious queen and all that. Oh wait, she's dead. Yes, we're talking about the DS version, which added an exclusive boss fight at the end of the game when you collected all the emeralds. 6 of the special stages are accessed by simply completing a level with 50 rings, whilst another is accessed by completing a level in Versus mode. These are some of the easiest in the whole series. They're split up into 3 segments where you collect specific coloured spheres. If you collect the wrong ones, it means there are less to collect in the later segments. None of the 7 stages are difficult. There are more than enough spheres to collect, and they're not even positioned in hard places. Once all the emeralds are collected, you get to fight the... I'm not sure I'm allowed to say that. This fight is super basic. Avoid some lasers, boost into some rocks, press a button. Repeat for 3 hits and Sonic beats the evil out of it, which is kind of his specialty at this point. Not much more to say. We've made it to Sonic's 20th anniversary with Sonic Generations. Both of them. The HD version was released first, so let's cover that now. The emeralds are collected as you play through the game normally, so that's no problem. The problem comes from the final boss, which is the Time Eater. This fight is awful. Not even in a frustrating way, it's just uneventful. All you do is boost forward. Just hold one button and you win the whole thing. Oh, and your friends won't shut up.
Charge into the core! Like that shot, Jake!
Looks like a homing shot.
That looks like a homing shot! It looks like a homing shot!
Yeah, comfortably one of the worst final bosses in the series. There's a major difference in the 3DS version, and that's the fact that you have to collect the emeralds through special stages. They automatically unlock when you complete both acts of a stage, and well, that was easy. Yeah, they may be ripped straight from Heroes, but the control here is light years better, meaning that these are hands down the easiest special stages in the entire franchise. It's not even a competition, none of them pose a challenge. Anyway, it should go without saying that this Time Eater fight is much better than the HD version. Instead of being able to switch between classic and modern at will, you alternate between the two between hits. The classic sections are simply avoiding attacks until an opening occurs to do a homing attack. Modern sections require you to chase down the Time Eater whilst avoiding attacks. When you're close enough, you can avoid the lunges and land a hit. These two phases are repeated, adding more attacks as you go. For the 8th and final hit, you boost with both Sonics towards the boss to pierce through its core and end the fight. Nothing special, but at least it's better than the HD version. Sonic then decided to spend the majority of the 2010s being a bit terrible, so there's a 6-year gap between Super Sonic boss fights. The next one pops up in Sonic Mania, and with this being a 2D game, that means we're back to collecting the emeralds ourselves. Entering special stages is done exactly like in Sonic 3, with giant rings hidden throughout the stages. I'm gonna re-emphasize that I don't think there's a better way of entering special stages than this, to be honest. The stages themselves are pretty good in my opinion. Not too easy, but not too hard. You have to collect blue spheres to gain speed to catch up to the emerald, whilst also collecting rings as they act as a timer. What's great about them is that there are so many giant rings in this game that you have a lot of attempts at getting the emeralds, so collecting them by the end of the game should be no problem, just like in Sonic 3. Once all 7 emeralds have been collected, you gain access to the Egg Reverie Zone, where you fight 2 bosses at the same time as Super Sonic. Phantom King and the Kleptomobile, which seems to be a repurposed Big Arm from Sonic 3, which I think is pretty cool. You have to hit both bosses 8 times to win. All you need to do is guide yourself into the bosses to hit them. This is easy with Eggman, but King fires projectiles that can damage you and make you lose rings. You can do a boost as Super Sonic, but it costs 5 rings and it's a surefire way to die, so don't bother. Patience is key here, so it's a shame I have none of it. I normally just go headfirst into both bosses until they die before I do. Sonic takes care of both bosses just in time to be transported to a much worse game. In hindsight, this should probably count as the bad ending, as at least the classic Sonic showing up in forces, and I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. With that, it's finally time to cover the most recent Sonic game from the release of this video, Sonic Frontiers. First off, collecting the Chaos Emerald is the main goal of each island. It's just a shame you have to play cyberspace levels in order to get them. Each island follows the same formula. You grab 6 emeralds wandering about the island, and the last one is in the possession of the big boss at the end. Except the last island. Eggman just gives you the last one there. So when you grab all 7 emeralds, I wonder what the bosses are like.
It's time to face your fears when your time has come and gone. I'll be the one to carry on. Break through it all and don't look down. You won't fade out, 'cause the fire in you never dies. It comes around to light the flame. They'll know your name. Burn it to the never end. The whole world know your name. When we dance with destiny. I've been there and I've seen it. I'm never gonna stop believing. You'll find your flame. I'm here, reaching far across these new frontiers. With my life, my fight this fear. In my hands, I hold the ones I love. Walk forward through the cold tide. Always the new horizons.
It's safe to say Super Sonic has had a bit of a stylistic change for this game. Yes, if we're being honest, they're a bit easy, can be finicky at times, and they would be nowhere near as good without the music, but who cares? This rules. It is all style and spectacle, and I love it. I can't remember the last time I smiled this hard whilst playing a Sonic game than when I first heard Undefeatable play in the first boss fight.
I won't give up
To the end of me.
Every boss theme elevates the fights to godlike standards. One thing that I think is genuinely great about these fights, however, is that Super Sonic has the same moveset as regular Sonic. It really helps to show how much more powerful Sonic is with the Emeralds. I mean, you cut one of the bosses in half with a sword. That is awesome! I'm surprised Rules of Nature isn't playing. I may have my complaints about Frontiers, but these boss fights represent some of the highest points in the entire franchise to me. So it's a shame that the true final boss is just Ikaruga. I'm making this video before Update 3 for this game, where I suspect they're going to change this fight, but either way, I think it's a bit of a disappointment of a final boss. I know it works for some people, but it doesn't work for me. I know you don't really play as Super Sonic here, but he is present and I wanted to talk about it. It's weird to see Sonic go from having to guide missiles to beat bosses to throwing them into mountainsides and cutting them in half, but I hope this presentation of Super Sonic continues in future 3D games. I don't know if I'd have as many super bosses as Frontiers did, because I think you run the risk of diminishing returns the more bosses you have. Either way, if we get more bosses like this in the future, I'd be more than happy. I hope you enjoyed this video. See ya.